I've brought you a lot of stories of players who, through their magic on the pitch, managed to overcome great injustice or discrimination, but this one is on a whole new level. After the First World War, many disputes over borders ensued, and the Balkan Peninsula would be a mess. In one specific case, an ethnic group referred to as the Aromanians would be persecuted by the Greek, who would force them into leaving their country for Romania. Amongst these refugees was one man who would set up home in the coast of the Black Sea. His name was Gheorghe Hagi. I know what you're thinking. Wasn't Hagi born in the 60s? Well, yes and no. It depends on what Gheorghe Hagi you're referring to, since he shared his name with both his father and grandfather, who happens to be the man I was referring to earlier. Though they had found a new place to stay, life wouldn't be perfect there either. The Aromanians would be discriminated and segregated, though in this case it would only make this story more impressive. His grandpa would actually be the one who would gift him his first ball, which, in Hagi's own words, would be a problem. It would be too good for his age and his size would make it even more impressive, but if there was someone who would not find it impressive at all, it would be the older kids who he would try to play with. According to Hagi, they hated him because they felt humiliated by the young boy, but he claims he never tried to mock the opponent. It was just how he played. He, like many other fantasistas, liked to play, well, magically. But it wouldn't be too long before he would find a worthy opposition. At first he would, like most kids, join the local youth team, but then something really impressive would happen. At the time, the Romanian Football Federation had created a young team for exceptional talents with the intent of elevating the national team to a new level, and Hagi, of course, would be called up for it at the age of 15. From then on it was tough, but according to Gheorghe, it was worth it. Though the living conditions at the academy were tough, with some even claiming that the dorms were infested with rats. But what mattered is that he had found his place, and as long as he managed to be the best there, he would achieve his dream. It wouldn't be long before he caused an immense impression. He has even claimed to have had interest from Barcelona, Juventus and Inter Milan as a teenager. But the Romanian law stopped minors from being able to leave the country, and just like that, Hagi was at a stalemate. Not knowing what he should do, he decided he was ready to take the step towards the top team. But first, he took one step back towards his roots, going back to play for Farul Constanta, his local team. But the next year it would finally be his time to shine as he joined Sportul Studentesc. But this move would be much tougher than it might seem at first glance. The club was playing at the UEFA Cup at the time, so they were a big deal in Romania, and having high standards they would question how good he could be, taking into account his height. And to make this transfer even harder, they would go on to find he had some serious lung and heart problems. They would only settle once Hagi agreed to sign a contract where he assured them that if he were to suffer any permanent injury on the pitch due to his condition, they would not be at fault. Once the move would materialize, he would also get called up for the first time for the national team, and only 2 years later he would get the captain's armband. His time at Sportul would be essential in his development, but it was clear he was deserving of a much better team, and his move would come in the most exciting way possible. Just the previous season, Steaua Bucharest had managed to win the Champions League, and they were now en route to face Dynamo Kiev in the European Super Cup, and they felt they needed instant reinforcements, and who would they call for the job? Gheorghe Hagi, of course, in a strange one-match loan. But then Gheorghe Hagi would be the savior, scoring the only goal of the match through a free kick, and from then on there was simply no way they could let go of him. A new contract would be written down and Hagi would permanently sign for Steaua Bucharest. It's easy to now look at this move and feel like it wasn't the best for him. After all, many of Europe's greats were after him at the time, but you have to realize that back then, Steaua was no joke. They had just won the Champions League, beating Barcelona on penalties, and Hagi was expected to help them maintain that level, and to be honest, in a way, he did. In his first full season at the club, he got them to the semi-finals of the Champions League, only going out to Benfica, but still domestically, they would win both the league and the cup. The following season would be Hagi's best at the club, getting 37 goals in 39 matches. In the Champions League, they would go even further this time, reaching the final as Hagi got 6 goals in 8 matches as he helped the team beat Galatasaray, Spartak Moscow and Sparta Prague. But once the final was reached, it was quite literally a different ball game. AC Milan was just on a different level. If Ruud Gullit would have been enough trouble to deal with, Van Basten would be even worse as he had scored 8 goals already in the competition that year. And in the final, both of them would get a brace as Steaua walked out of the pitch in humiliation. After a third season where he would get a third consecutive domestic double, the pressure of a foreign move would finally catch up to him. At the time there was no lack of teams trying to secure his transfer, but Romania's communist government kept trying to hold back the transfer until eventually they couldn't do it any longer, as Real Madrid secured the deal for 4.3 million euros, which at the time was a huge sum. He ended his time at Steaua with 98 goals in 107 matches and entered a new chapter in his career. This was supposed to have been the move to make Hagi perhaps the best player on the planet, but things wouldn't go so well. Hagi was already 25 years old at this point, would only manage 4 goals in his first season, taking no trophies beside the Super Cup. By then, his place at the club was already being questioned. In his second season, he would have to prove everyone wrong and bring the club to glory, and for a while it seemed maybe he would. Though Real had already fallen to Torino in the UEFA Cup semi-finals, even though Hagi himself scored to assure their win in the first leg, there were now 2 games left in the season, the last match day of the league against Tenerife, who as you might imagine were expected to stand no chance against the mighty Real, and the final of the Copa del Rey against their city rivals Atletico de Madrid. By the 30-minute mark, Real would be 2 goals in front in their match against Tenerife, one of them coming from Hagi of course, and at this point what could possibly go wrong, right? Well, Real were a mere 2 points ahead of Barcelona in the league, and as you're probably expecting at this point, Tenerife pulled off the underdog comeback of the century, getting a goal before half-time and then getting a penalty in the 77th minute that would have already been enough to put Real below Barcelona, but perhaps the team was that struck by what had happened that they would allow Tenerife to go in front in the following minutes. They would lose the match and watch Barcelona go in front and take the trophy. Already a disaster, but at least they could still win the Copa del Rey, of course. They didn't. They would further humiliate themselves by losing the final to their city rivals. It was 100% a season to forget, so much so that Hagi would leave the club and join Brescia out of all possible teams. He claimed that playing amongst superstars like Hugo Sanchez and Emilio Butragueño made him feel constantly anxious and on edge, being unable to focus and play like he always did. But still, you may ask, why Brescia? Well, Mircea Lucescu, who had coached Hagi at the Romanian national team for some time, had just joined the club and he was building himself a small Romanian army at the club, almost like Nuno Espírito Santo has done recently, signing several Portuguese players to play for Wolves in the Premier League. And of course that idea enticed Hagi, who was clearly looking for some time out of the spotlight. But if you thought he couldn't go any lower, I'm sorry to tell you or maybe remind you that in his first season in Italy, Brescia would be relegated to Serie B. Hagi was unable to fix their lack of goal scoring, with the club only managing 36 goals over the full league season. At this point most would leave, but perhaps Hagi felt an obligation to help the club and he stayed. Though problems would start to arise, with Lucescu claiming Hagi was a player with no work ethic, that if it wasn't for that he would be as good as Maradona. That might have lit a fire inside Hagi as he would start having some of his best performances ever, helping them get promoted back to the top tier, though he wouldn't manage any more than a 3rd place finish. It's hard to understand how a team with a player like Hagi would not manage to dominate the 2nd tier of Italian football, but it is what it is. At this point, Hagi was hitting a turnaround point in his career, and the 1994 World Cup with Romania would be his masterpiece. Though they would barely qualify to the tournament, and being that Colombia were their first opponent, no one gave them much of a chance. But Hagi wasn't just gonna back down, putting up an incredible performance, assisting 2 goals and scoring the other with an unexpected strike from 40 yards out. After a down-to-earth moment as they lost 4-1 to Switzerland, Romania would manage a tight 1-0 victory over the United States to make it into the knockout stage. If things have been tough so far, imagine what they felt like now that they had to face Maradona's Argentina. Well, not really Maradona's, considering he had been banned due to doping in the previous match, but still on paper a far superior team to that of Romania. But they were on a roll now, and Hagi would keep dropping incredible performances, this time getting a goal and an assist to take the mighty Argentina down. Unfortunately, this would be the last chapter of the fairy tale, as the match, with a slightly less inspired performance by Hagi against Sweden, would see them getting knocked out of the tournament in the quarterfinals. Still, despite the early exit, Hagi would be named in the team of the tournament. Also, as a side note, his goal against Colombia would eventually be deemed the 5th ever greatest goal scored in a World Cup. His exhibitions in the World Cup would actually end up reviving his career, as Johan Cruyff signed him to play for Barcelona for £2 million. But as much as it was Hagi's attempt to revive his career, it was also Cruyff's attempt to revive his squad. Since winning the Champions League 2 years earlier, Barcelona had faced accusations of having lost their passion, even though over those 2 years they had won La Liga twice and even been to a Champions League final just months prior. Though, to be fair, the events of that final might have been what triggered the desire to sign Hagi, as they were destroyed 4-0 by AC Milan. Somehow Hagi was being put in charge of reviving a team with the likes of Romario and Stoichkov. As you might imagine, no one man would be able to stop the foreseen downfall of this team. In his first season, Barcelona finally failed to win the league, only managing a 4th place finish. To further complicate these tasks, this poor season would lead to the departure of both Stoichkov and Romario, and though new talent like Luis Figo would arrive, they would end the season completely trophyless, with Hagi struggling to get playing time, only playing the full 99 times over the season. As it had already been to this point, Hagi wasn't a player for the spotlight, and once again he would leave the club, joining his final ever team, Galatasaray. Despite his old age, 31 at the time of arrival, his time in Turkey would perhaps be his most successful. From his first few matches, everyone saw his value, scoring twice in his debut and getting the winner in the second match. By the end of the league season, he would have been involved in 24 goals across 30 matches played, and Galatasaray would be Turkish champions for the first time in 3 years. The following season, he showed no signs of slowing down, scoring wonder goal after wonder goal. He was a sight to behold, and very quickly he would become a cult hero for Turkish football fans as he led Galatasaray to another league title. After a third domestically successful season for good measure, one clear wish was in the minds of every Galatasaray fan: European success. After all, that season they had managed to tie Juventus at the top of their Champions League group, only being left behind on goal difference, so maybe there really was a chance. After some changes to the Champions League layout, Galatasaray's 3rd place finish now warranted them a place in the UEFA Cup, making their chances of taking silverware home much greater. To start with, their luck wouldn't be the best, drawing Dortmund in the last 16. Still, with a goal by Hagi, they would get the first leg lead and hold on to it through both matches. Mallorca in the quarters would be a breeze, beating them comfortably in both matches. Once they got through Leeds in the semi-finals, it was time for one final test. As much as the UEFA Cup might always live in the shadow of the Champions League, the final is still one of the most important sporting events of the year. And as I've been telling you, the spotlight had always been outside of Hagi's comfort zone. Perhaps this time he would defy what was expected of him and break through, fearlessly conquering European football. But no. This story, though it might end well in a way, isn't a fairy tale. After 90 minutes of goalless football, Hagi would give in to the pressure, getting into a fight with Arsenal captain Tony Adams and eventually getting the red card. Though it could be argued that the red card wasn't deserved considering Adams only got a yellow, what matters is that at the end of the day, Hagi had disappointed at the biggest stage once more. But as I said, there is a happy ending in a way, as Galatasaray would still go on to win on penalties without Hagi. In his final season, there would still be time for some memorable moments, first as they played in the European Super Cup against Real Madrid, a team with players like Raul, Roberto Carlos, Makalele and Luis Figo. Though it would be Mario Jardel who would score twice for Galatasaray, the star of the show in a way would be Hagi, who at 35 years of age was a nightmare for Roberto Carlos. At a point nearly getting into a fight with a Brazilian who had had enough of his flicks and tricks. By the end, the trophy would fly back to Turkey with Galatasaray. This would also be the year Galatasaray finally made it to the Champions League knockout stage. The Real Madrid would get their revenge, knocking them out in the first round even though Galatasaray would manage to beat them in the first leg. But the very end of Hagi's career would be yet another disappointment. 4 matches before the end of the league season, they were 3 points in front of Fenerbahce, but they still had to play against them, and of course, as you might expect, they would lose. And even as goal difference could still grant them the league title, they would make sure to lose the next game as well, allowing Fenerbahce to take the trophy as Hagi's career came to an end. I don't need to tell you how good Hagi was technically. The only thing I need to say is that he was perhaps the player that most got compared to Maradona, besides perhaps Lionel Messi. His talent was undeniable, but what is also undeniable is that he failed to live up to the expectations. But sometimes it isn't all about winning titles. We love football because it is art. It is a form of expression. In a way, it's nearly magical. At least when you're that good at it. I think that's why Hagi has been one of the most requested players I've had on the channel, because people just want to relive his magic one last time. Now it's time for the ranking system, and I just want to say that it's always tough to rate any player, but players like Hagi, who are very loved by the fans despite how much they may have disappointed in some aspects, are the toughest. Because trust me, I have no intention of bad-mouthing any player, but I do have to try my best to be fair. It's part of what makes these videos interesting, so yeah, please bear with me and don't take any of this too seriously. When it comes to finishing, he has some impressive numbers, with 300 career goals in a playmaking role, but considering the most he ever got in a top 5 league was 12 in a season, I guess that discredits him a bit. It's a 9 out of 10. The next 2 attributes are simple. He was a genius on the pitch, both playmaking and dribbling are 10s out of 10. Speed and physicality is interesting. Another player was incredibly fast and very tough despite his height. An 8 out of 10. Mentality is a 6 out of 10. Poor at the big stage and problematic. Though I didn't mention it much, he had some serious attitude problems, spitting on referees and getting his fair share of red cards. Longevity and adaptability, well, he had an incredibly tough time adapting to other leagues, but he did have a surprisingly long career, still exceptional at 35. It's a 7 out of 10. Flair is simple, a 10 out of 10, wonderful. When it comes to his trophy cabinet, it's hard, a good amount of trophies but no top 5 league title and no major international trophy besides the UEFA Cup. It's a 6 out of 10. Finally, the icon factor. His notoriety has clearly suffered over the years, but he remains as a cult hero for hardcore football fans, so I think he deserves at least an 8 out of 10. This totals out to 74 out of 90, level with Rooney and Dani Alves. I feel like he would deserve more, but of course, you now have the chance to vote on what you think of him through the link in the description, and that could make the difference in the rankings and will hopefully boost him a bit. I'd also like to point out that I'm making this video in advance, so this week I can show you the last week's X Factor, but soon I'll update the list. And yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed Gheorghe Hagi's career in a video. Also, by the way, I always thought his name was pronounced George, like everyone else, and apparently it has like this weird Romanian well, not weird, just, a Romanian different way of pronouncing it. I don't know, I found that very interesting. But yeah, regardless, this is it. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're new. And yeah, see you next time. Bye.